Mauricio, I have to ask, one of the biggest fights that could be made is Crawford and Spence. If that fight doesn't get made, there's a Keith Thurman ranked #1. I mean, I know doesn't mean it's mandatory, but is that probably something that will happen, that Keith Thurman will be fighting for the WBC?
Well, we all have been pushing for the Spence-Crawford ultimate match. That would be sensational. Keith Thurman did a semi-final elimination. Ortiz was going to do an elimination with a Venetian. Something happened. Ortiz opted to fight for another organization, elimination. So we don't know at this moment where he stands. But Thurman is right there in the mix for a possible final elimination, or he could challenge directly Spence in a voluntary defense.
And is there like because we know like big fights need some time to work things out. So we know you also have mandatories and forth. Is there kind of a cutoff when that might get pushed for Spence?
Well,
or
we're going to see at the convention, we cannot mandate Crawford. He's champion of the WBO.
Correct.
So we cannot mandate him as a mandatory.
Correct.
We did one experiment a few years ago with Kovalev, and everything was good. We forced Adonis Stevenson to have Kovalev as a mandatory fight, and then Kovalev step away and make everyone look like a fool, especially me.
Yeah.
But we tried and it didn't work, and that's a reality. We cannot disrespect another organization because the champion has their own commitments to the organization.
Absolutely.
I hope the fight is done, and we will completely support it.
The convention.
Those are the words of Mauricio Sulaima as he responds to the possibility of Keith Thurman being a mandatory for the WBC. And let me counterpunch. I see the Thurman-Spence fight happening before the Spence-Crawford fight at this point. You know, we had optimism, we had momentum, we had desire, supposedly on both sides. And the fight's still not done. So obviously there's something that's a holdup. That's something that Mr. Al Haymon doesn't want to get done, doesn't want to get made, doesn't want to push a few things. And a lot of time people think, oh man, it's hard, it's politics. No, well, basically it's still up to people. Okay, it's the people that run the politics. It's the people that run the organizations on how things work and what they will allow and what they won't. Al Haymon, I don't think, would want Terrence Crawford. Why? Because Terrence Crawford is not a home team player. He's not a type of fighter that you can, he's not a Thurman. He's not a Garcia. He's not someone that's been with the PBC for the last 7-8 years. He's not. He's a outsider. Okay? He might do business with them, but he's not a guaranteed commodity that's going to stay with the WBC, he's not going to stay with Al Haymon in Showtime or Fox. He's not destined to do that, you know, and especially if he beats Errol Spence, that wipes away any potential earning power from Spence. See, Spence is one of those premier fighters, okay? And when you have these type of premier fighters that these advisors, such as Al Haymon or whatever you want to call him, he wants him, or he's setting him aside to do something else. See, Canelo Alvarez is a guy that they know they want to bank off. They want that high top dollar. Terrence Crawford is the resistance. He's one of the most talented, but he's also one of the most underrated as far as marquee value, because he not only will he beat you up, you won't make a lot of money with him as opposed to fighting Canelo. Not saying Errol Spence can beat any of those guys, because I don't know if Errol Spence could. I would like to see him try, but there's no guarantee that he would beat any of those guys. But the problem with fighting Canelo, you know you're going to get compensated. Look at Gennady Golovkin. Why do you think Gennady Golovkin has been chasing Canelo since the first fight? Because he got a taste of that money. That's why. And I don't know. And I think Al Haymon, if he done anything, he's advised Errol Spence to hold off that O, because he's not convinced that he will beat Terrence Crawford. Now, if he was, he would have made that fight just like that. Now, will the fight ever be made? Yes, when Terrence Crawford looks a lot more beatable than he did. Okay? See, obviously something in that Sean Porter fight disturbed him. Disturbed the handlers around Spence. The Ugas fight disturbed him. So it just wasn't Terrence Crawford stopping Sean Porter. It was the fact that Errol Spence looked beatable and he looked non-durable in spots in that fight. So when that happens, they know, let's protect our commodity. Let's protect our premier fighter that we know that we want to promote in the future. And let's stop him from fighting guys like Crawford. So what do? We add Kieth Thurman. Bring Mauricio Sulaima on board. Let's make that happen. Let's make Kieth Thurman, who once upon a time was the WBC champion until it was snatched from him by Manny Pacquiao. Okay, if you guys remember that fight back in 19. He lost to a split decision loss, so they'll justify putting Thurman up there. Thurman is a self-promoting fighter that once upon a time Thurman was one-time Thurman, and he was, you better not duck me, son. You better not duck me, son. He was one of that guy. He was that guy that charged Floyd's ass up, and I think that he convinced Floyd to get the hell out of there because Floyd knew, I'm not fighting that dude because if he beats me, what am I going to do? How is that going to affect my legacy? See, Al Heyman has that same desire for Errol Spence. What if he fights Terrence Crawford and Terrence Crawford beats him at this point of his career? It'll mess everything up. Okay, there will be no Canelo fight because Canelo wouldn't want to fight anybody that has got beat by Crawford. You know, especially in that own stage. I mean, why would he want to? But then again, what would Canelo gain from fighting Errol Spence? So the hope, I feel, for Errol Spence would be that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, and that pot of gold is a ginger named Canelo. Okay, so I think a fight, of course, between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence won't happen before a fight between Errol Spence and Kieth Thurman does. Okay, the former unified versus the newly reigning unified welterweight champion. If that makes sense, I could already see it. You guys tell me what you think. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace!